assurance of metropolitan grandeur and future prosperity, such as but a few cities of the world can hope to attain. That was quite a statement for a city that was then only about 350,000. But they were right, and that water allowed the other cities to come together to share in it, allowed all of us to benefit from the growth and the resources. Christine Mulholland and our mayor talked a little bit about the future. I just want to throw in my last few cents about that. I'm a co-chair of one of the big civic efforts, which is to restore the LA River and bring back not only its habitat, its water, but also development along this amazing corridor. And as we think about where that water comes from, we've all heard that we're out of sources. One of the great sources that we forget about was what kept Los Angeles growing when it only had the early LA River. So the next time it rains, look to the heavens and say, there it is, take it.
Now that was a great line, and good luck with your LA River. That's a terrific project you're doing. While representing California in 1906 before the U.S. Senate, Senator Louis Flint led the campaign to permit construction of the Los Angeles Aqueduct on federal land. Without this man's dedication and support, the City of Angels would have never gotten her water. Ha ha! Take the microphone.
The fate of the Owens River project was put into the hands of the people of Los Angeles September 7th, 1905. The $1.5 million bond was approved by a vote of 10-1. Now the fight for the water really began. The bill easily passed the Senate, but ran into trouble in the House of Representatives, where Congressman Sylvester Smith of Inyo County organized the opposition. His argument was that Los Angeles did not require the water now, but we were seeking to acquire it for future needs. He argued that irrigation in Southern California should not take place at the expense of irrigation in the Owens Valley. I needed to reach out to the highest authority in the land. I appealed to the President of the United States. It is 100 or 1,000-fold more important to the state of California and more valuable to our people as a whole if this water is used by the city of Los Angeles than if used by the people of the Owens Valley. The great Rough Rider, President Theodore Roosevelt, signed the Act of Congress of June 30th, 1906. The only task that remained was to build the aqueduct. As Mr. Mulholland once said, whoever brings the water brings the people. Where Los Angeles got her water and her people got a fight. The Owens Valley took that decision to heart, and dissension ensued. After all, whose water is it? Nonetheless, a question to be reckoned with. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ron Nichols, General Manager of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Thank you, Senator Flint. We're celebrating here today the marvel of engineering, the marvel of foresight, a century later, a century of the delivery of water, water that truly created the city of Los Angeles, without which we would not be sitting here today. But it's also been a century of tension between the people of Owens Valley and the Eastern Sierra and Los Angeles. In the last 20 years, there's been a fair amount of compromise with respect to that. Granted, a lot of it came out of legal action, not all. But through that, we have less than half the water that we used to receive through the LA Aqueduct to make things better in Owens Valley. We've had to replace that water from other sources. a lot more difficult in terms of the number of buttons that we need to push than building something as magnificent as this large project that we're celebrating here today. There's two main points sources that we've used. One is our local water supply, which some others have spoken about here. And those are four key components that make that local water supply. We have conservation, which Los Angeles has done an incredible job. People don't realize often when you stray outside of Los Angeles that we use less water per capita than any major city in the United States, and we can be very proud of that. We've captured stormwater. We're recycling water. We use our local groundwater, which unfortunately is increasingly contaminated. The second major source of that is purchases from the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And about 80% of that water comes from Northern California, coming through the Delta, an issue that we're dealing with, an issue of incredible importance right now on a statewide basis. When we have dry years, we need even more and more of that water from Northern California. Now, we have formally adopted, as the board of the Department of Water and Power, the Water and Power Commissioners, a goal to reduce by half that water that we purchase from Metropolitan Water District. Again, over 80% of that coming from Northern California. And we're achieving that, hopefully, right now, our current adopted plan, by 2035, to do even more conservation than we've done, to recycle even more water, to capture more stormwater, and to clean up that contaminated San Fernando Valley aquifer, upon which we rely for a significant portion, which increasingly is becoming a challenge. But we're not stopping at that. We have recently adopted a goal, a fairly significant goal, and we're not certain if we can attain accelerating that 2035 goal of 50% reduction of MWD purchases by 2025, a full decade earlier than we're looking at. And as a part of that change, that's a major transformation. And the water that we receive from the Owens Valley through the LA Aqueduct becomes even more important than it is today. Through that process, we're looking to develop a master project partnering with Owens Valley to reduce the amount of water that we put for dust mitigation. But in so doing, increase the value of wildlife habitat, increase the visible appearance, increase opportunities for tourism up in there, which is a major part of the economy of the Owens Valley, and to develop a plan that as we use more water-wise methods to continue to control the dust on Owens Lake, that we share some of that water at some level with Owens Valley to help economic purposes up in the valley. Los Angeles can and we will meet these challenges. For that next century of water supply, pulling all those different levers, reducing our reliance on imported water, continuing to wisely use the water that we get out of the Owens Valley, and do so affordably in an environmentally sustainable manner. William Mulholland's Los Angeles Aqueduct will continue to be the cornerstone of that supply. I'd like to thank Mayor Garcetti, members of our City Council, members of our Board of Water and Power Commissioners, members of our customers, the citizens of Los Angeles, and our employees for their continued support and effort to be able to continue the legacy of this incredible project as the Los Angeles Aqueduct becomes and continues to be a vital cornerstone and anchoring point of the future of Los Angeles. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. And never forget the cornerstone and the civil employees. Los Angeles is and always will be a place after my own heart. This land has the same attraction for me that it had for the Indians. So attractive that it at once became something about which my whole scheme of life was woven. Oh, I love it so much. Ladies and gentlemen, dignitaries, and fellow civil employees, rise up now. Come on your feet, every one of you, and follow me for something just a wee bit dramatic.
The guests are now walking to the sides of the Cascades, just as thousands of Los Angeles residents did on this day 100 years ago. We have some rare footage of that event as the aqueduct was opened for the very first time. Let's take a look. I see William Mulholland, the engineer who was in charge of building this aqueduct project, and he's ready to give the signal to open the valves and let the water flow into the city. This is the moment we've all been waiting for.
All the dust. Come on up. On this. Is it on there? No.
Commissioner, get in here. Commissioners, you get in here.
Okay.
Are you going to be waving the flag?
Yeah.
Watch your heads, guys, because you're going to wave a flag.
I'll wave that way, too. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Step back just a little. On this crude platform is an altar to consecrate the delivery of this wonderful water supply that's valuable, and dedicate to all of you for posterity forever a magnificent body of water. And here we go. for it now. Wait for it. Just wait for it. There it comes. There it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. Okay. They wanted us to keep it quiet, but you know what? After all that speaking, I water. Anybody I can get some. Oh, and wait for it now. The rolling cascades, after all. The corner, as she comes, and there it is! Take it!
And so the ceremony has concluded with the recreation of the opening of the Los Angeles Aqueduct exactly 100 years ago today. And those of you at home can actually come out and see the cascades for yourself. The gates will be open Wednesday through Friday, that's November 6th, 7th, and 8th from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. They'll also be open here Saturday, November 9th from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. It's located here at the intersection of Foothill Boulevard and Balboa Boulevard. That's here in Sylmar, just between the 5 and 210 freeways. On behalf of all the men and women at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, we thank you so much for joining us today for our coverage. I'm Anita Bennett, live, and goodbye from Sylmar.
Hi, I'm Gil Reyes.
And I'm Rasha Goel. Welcome to another edition of Latitude, the latest in business and trade news from the Port of Los Angeles.
In this edition, you will ride along on a heavy load ship as it delivers 2 massive cranes to the West Basin Container Terminal at dawn. Let's get started exploring this edition of Latitude.
As ports deepen their channels and make other infrastructure improvements to accommodate larger ships, there's also a need for taller, wider extending cranes to service the largest vessels in the Trans-Pacific trade. The West Basin Container Terminal, known as WBCT, recently craned up. With the addition of 2 new cranes, WBCT's total number of Super Post-Panamax ship-to-shore cranes is now 10. On a pre-dawn morning in September, the crane ship Zenhua 19 arrived in the port's outer harbor. Her cargo? A pair of ship-to-shore cranes weighing 1,400 tons each. The port sent 2 of its most experienced pilots to navigate the Zenhua down the port's main channel. For maximum clearance, the giant cranes transited under the Vincent Thomas Bridge during the lowest tide, which left the port pilots with one choice: delivery at 5:30 a.m. in the dark.
As you can see in front of me at the bridge, these gantry cranes pose a big visibility concern, makes the vessel very restricted in their ability to maneuver. So over the past couple weeks, we've coordinated the safe operation to get this under the Vincent Thomas Bridge and over to the terminal. We've had a big team working together on this. We've had the Coast Guard, the Los Angeles port pilots who were critical to bringing this in safely, the LA Port Police, and just all the port partners we could engage to make sure everyone was working together to make this a safe operation.
One of the things that we use to make this job go a little better is we have what we call carry-on navigation equipment. It's a GPS antenna, it tells precisely where the ship is, and I've got basically an ECDIS chart that I can see on a pen tablet, and I see a graphic representation of where the ship is in the channel. Ben Christensen, who is our chief pilot, who was involved in the planning process, was also here to assist with watching for traffic, double checking what I was doing. It's always good to have 2 sets of eyes.
Now that the cranes have successfully arrived and the ship is safely docked at the West Basin Container Terminal, the process of offloading these 2 giant cranes can begin. Mark Wheeler, the Vice President and General Manager of WBCT, can tell us about the process of getting these cranes offloaded and up and running.
The discharge of the cranes was a very efficient operation. They came underneath the bridge in a lowered position. A ship came alongside, and within 1 week we were able to discharge the cranes and ready to commission them. We put these cranes now into a raised position over a total of another 3 weeks. We will commission the cranes over the next 2 months, and this is just to make sure that they're all ready to go into production cycle. These cranes can outreach 22 wide, which is capable of handling the biggest ships in the Port of Los Angeles. The Port of LA has been a great partner to work with the acquisition of this cranes. They've been a great help in the permitting process, working with the port pilots. All the staff of the Port of LA made this a very easy project for us to get in and was completely seamless.
With their 2 new cranes in place, the total number of Super Post-Panamax ship-to-shore cranes at WBCT is now 10, arming the West Basin facility with added muscle, which enables them to discharge more than one of the largest ships at a time.
Property theft has spiked in the area the past year due to easy access for thieves. Almost 80% of car theft occurs because of unlocked doors. Locking your doors takes a matter of seconds and can become so routine that you may forget whether you locked your doors or not. But it's worth the effort to double check. The more successful thieves are at taking items out of a car, the more chances they are going to come back to that area. Don't let our town be that area. One simple precaution is to hide or cover any valuable items when leaving your car unattended. Simple actions like these can prevent you from becoming a victim of property theft. The Los Angeles Police Department would like you to remember, lock it or lose it.
This is Koreatown. My name is Hwang Bae Kim. You watch LA City View, Channel 35. Our city, our channel.
Okay, good morning, good morning. If everyone could please take their seats. It is Thursday, May 18th. I want to welcome you to this special budget meeting of the Los Angeles City Council. Madam Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Blumenfield, Bonin, Buscaino, Cedillo, Englander, Harris Dawson, Weezer, Koretz, Krikoran, Martinez, O'Farrell, Price, Rue, Wesson, 14 members and a quorum, Mr. President.
And what is before this body?
Mr. President, item 1 is the continued consideration of the Budget and Finance Committee report relative to the Mayor's proposed 2017-18 budget for the city, related motions and resolutions. The public hearing was held and closed yesterday on May 17th.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to defer to Mr. Krikorian to start us off.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and good morning, members. As you know, the Budget and Finance Committee report was brought before the Council yesterday for purposes of public comment, and public comment was had yesterday here. In addition, the Budget and Finance Committee produced this report over the course of 2 weeks of budget hearings. About 35 hours of work within committee to prepare the report that's before you. We heard from and reviewed the budgets of 44 city departments, bureaus, and other agencies. We received more than 100 public comments as we went through that process. The Budget and Finance Committee considered presentations by the coalition of our city unions as well as the recommendations of the Neighborhood Council budget advocates. We also heard from a wide array of stakeholders, nonprofit organizations, agencies, community service providers throughout our city who perform such important work, and all of that input was taken into account in what you have before you. So I want to just go over some of the 30,000-foot level review of this budget and some of the highlights of the recommendations that are before you, and then I'm going to turn it over to the CLA to go through page by page. And just to remind you of our process on this, what we will do is we will consider the entire Budget and Finance Committee report on a page-by-page basis, and as we go through each page, I'd like to ask members to call special any items that they want to be considered. If items are not called special, we'll deem that page approved, and we'll keep going through on a page-by-page basis until we're done. At the conclusion of that, we'll begin taking up the discussion of items called special, and at the conclusion of that, we'll begin taking up your motions that we'll be able to vote on here in Council. Any motion that you still intend to submit that's going to have a budget impact, I will ask the Council President to refer to the Budget and Finance Committee so that we aren't making budget-related decisions on the fly without analysis and review, as has been our practice in prior years. So, the budget is $9.2 billion, which includes $5.8 billion approximately in the general fund and $3.4 billion in special funds. The reserve fund is once again this year over 5%, meets the city's financial policies. This is, in fact, although it's down a bit from last year, this is the highest reserve that we've had in modern history, with the exception of last year and the year before. So although it is down a bit, it still is a very, very strong reserve fund at 5.11%. In addition, we have $96.2 million set aside in the Budget Stabilization Fund. This is the highest level the Budget Stabilization Fund has reached since it was created. And when you take that $96 million and add it to the reserve fund, you come up to well over 6% that we can count on in case of a financial decline or emergency in the city. In terms of revenue, many sources of revenue are up this year, which is good news. Property taxes significantly up, utility users tax, sales tax, the business tax saw about 3.7% growth this year, and a number of others, TOT and others. It should be important to note for your constituents that parking fine revenue, however, is down. So we are relying less on parking fines than we have in past years, as well as a few others that are down. This budget, I should point out to you, because it will require significant additional discussion and consideration by this council, but the budget assumes revenues from a few areas that the Council has not resolved policy on yet. And so I just want to highlight that in advance, that the budget assumes revenues of $37 million relating to Airbnb, and it assumes $12 million in revenues from potential billboard policy to be adopted. So those are assumed in this budget. We will still need to act on those policies, but keep in mind that if we go in another direction on those policies, we will have to find a replacement for those revenues. In terms of public safety, the budget maintains over 10,000 sworn officers. We are adding hiring, especially due to the Metro contract for security on Metro. We are adding another 7,000 cameras for on-duty police officers, adding $1.5 million for the domestic abuse teams, and $1 million for the ACOP program, which provides students with a pathway to become police officers. In terms of fire service, we're adding over $10 million to hire and train 195 more firefighters, which will actually grow the department, not just keep up with attrition, but grow the department by 75 net firefighters. We'll also be adding funding for 2 new engine companies and also funding a youth program coordinator to oversee the LA Fire Department's girls' camp to help recruit more women into the fire department. With regard to homelessness, this is the largest allocation for homelessness that the city has ever spent in its history. $176 million for housing and services relating for homelessness, $89 million of it coming from the voter-approved measure HHH. That will include $122 million for permanent housing, over $11 million for shelters, almost $37 million for engagement and cleanliness efforts, including $3 million for outreach and sanitation teams to improve health and safety conditions surrounding homeless encampment. So a significant step forward in our commitment to addressing homelessness. There's investments in this budget for economic and business improvements, including, very importantly to all of us, updating community plans and expediting that process, continuing to the Higher LA Summer Jobs Program, funding for day labor centers, and a new investment of $1.8 million towards city asset management, which has been a really important part of our strategy for jobs creation and economic impetus. In terms of transit, we'll have a more robust discussion shortly about transit. The good news is that because the voters believed in the future of Los Angeles and are willing to invest in it, and the California State Legislature did likewise, we have new funding sources from Measure M and from the gas tax increase, which will significantly expand our pie as we look at ways to address moving people around the city more efficiently and more safely. And we'll be meeting both of those goals with not only with the budget recommendation that you have before you, but with an amendment to that Mr. Bonin and I will be offering to you with regard to Vision Zero funding. Sidewalks, we continue our investment in sidewalk repairs with $31 million set aside for sidewalk repair as an additional payment towards our nearly $1 billion that we'll be spending to fix every sidewalk in the city of Los Angeles. We will be investing in our youth through LA's Best expansion, which we will be providing funding for 1,000 additional students. $2 million in new funding for graffiti abatement, $7 million additional for tree trimming and stump removal, and a number of other quality of life improvements like that. A couple of areas that are a little bit still difficult for us. One is the city's liability claims account. As you all know, we have seen spikes in our liability obligations. And those of us who sit in budget and finance every week see those judgments and those settlements coming through, and we are troubled every week by the increasing amount of liability that the city faces. We're engaging in a very significant risk management effort, the council working with the city departments, with the mayor's office and the city attorney to try to bring those numbers down, but they haven't come down yet, and so we have a significantly increased appropriation in this budget for liability claims of over $100 million. So we have to continue to monitor that and make sure that we're on track to be able to meet our liability obligations. Let me just skip ahead here a little bit. Yeah, let me talk a little bit about risks, because I've given you the architecture. So far, so good. Balanced budget, maintaining the reserve, that's all very good news. Revenues are up, all good. But we can't look at the budget as a 1 year at a time process anymore in this city. We've done that in the past, and it's led us into significant problems in the past. So I would just remind all members that as we look forward, we still have several years ahead of us where we can expect to be facing deficits in our budget, and where we can expect to experience continuing structural deficit that needs to be addressed. So our discipline must be maintained over the course of the next few years. It's compounded by the fact that we have so much uncertainty around the state of our federal government right now, and the risks that this city faces to potential grant funding and other funding sources that we've relied upon from the federal government. The health of the economy. We've had increases in revenues. Many of those are driven by the fact that the economy has been very strong in the city of Los Angeles and throughout our country. Strong economies never last forever. There are cycles in the economy, and we can expect that that cycle will at some point turn down. We will be faced with confronting the impacts on our revenues that come from that. It is becoming an increasing risk as pension funds throughout the country are looking at their assumed rate of return. As much as I might rail against it, our pension fund trustees may very well look at an adjustment of our assumed rate of return, the pension fund's assumed rate of return. If that should happen, and if that assumed rate of return is adjusted downward, that has a direct impact and a dramatic impact on the general fund of the city in future years. It won't affect us this year, but it will affect us in future years, and it will increase the risk that we'll be facing a larger structural deficit problem if the trustees should take that action, which will have real impacts on real services and city employees who are actively working for the city today. So that's a risk that we need to anticipate and be concerned about. Police overtime is always a little challenging to predict and to address. Many of you have heard that there's been a significant change this year because of the MTA contract and because of negotiations with our police union about what their overtime level should be. Some of you have heard from them about that, and we heard from the chief, who was concerned that the budget as presented might leave the city short in its ability to fund police overtime over the course of the year. And if that should happen, the chief informed us that he might need to go to a comp time overtime payment solution, which would lead potentially to fewer officers on the street. So the Budget and Finance Committee addressed that by setting aside $10 million as a reserve for mid-year uncertainties, designed to address exactly that problem. So if we should fall short, we have $10 million to rely upon. If we have economic catastrophe, or if we have a reduction in federal funding, or we have some of these other problems befall us, we will have to make that assessment at that time of what to do with that $10 million, whether to use that to try to address other needs and come up with a different solution for police overtime, or whether that money could just go to police overtime. So it's not earmarked specifically for that, but it is there with the intention of future resolution of that potential shortfall. There's a $10 million that we can use to do that with. So I think that pretty much covers the overview. I just want to say that as a general matter, the mayor and the council and the committee worked very closely in preparing what's before you. It is a good budget. It is not as robust, perhaps, as we have had in years past, or at least last year, or what I had hoped we would be doing in the years coming as we continue to try to address the structural deficit problem. But that is just a function of the fact that our economy is slowing. It's not growing at the same rate, and we have increased costs. It's still a solid budget, but it's a budget that I have to keep reminding us we need to continue to be disciplined in order to make sure that we don't fall into the same pitfalls that we had a decade ago in coming years. So with that, just a little bit about process. So I'm going to turn it over to the CLA. As I mentioned, we'll go through it page by page. Be plenty of time for as much detailed discussion as you want to get into onto any item in this budget. I would just ask that you call each of those items special, and if it doesn't require discussion, we can move forward. Those matters called special we'll discuss, and then we'll bring up the motions. How many motions do we have so far?
10 are ready to go,
okay.
And the packet will be distributed shortly.
Okay. So I think there's more than that are in the works, but we have fewer motions than in prior years, so that may be a promising sign. Thank you, members. But however many there are, even if we get up to significantly more than that, I think this should be an expeditious process, and I hope that we'll be able to wrap this up relatively early in the day. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the CLA to begin walking us through the budget.
Good morning. So the report before you on Attachment 1 contains 145 recommendations from the Budget and Finance Committee. Andrea Galvin of the CLA's office will walk you through those recommendations. We will go page by page, and members, if you can call out the ones that you wish to discuss further, we will set those aside, and then, as the chair indicated, that we will move forward to the next page and deem the ones not called special as approved. Andrea?
Good morning.
Morning.
The first section of the report provides a summary of the Budget and Finance Committee hearings. Attachment 1, page 1, is where the recommendations begin, the committee recommendations. There are also Attachment 6 has requested reports that came out of the committee. We can take those up all at once at this time if you'd like, or we can save that until after we've gone through recommendations. It's up to you.
Stick them up all at once.
Okay, so that would be, it's page 1 of Attachment 6, page 1 through 12. These are the requested reports and special studies that came out of Budget and Finance Committee.
Actually, there are 88.
Karen, I didn't hear you.
There are 88. We're on Attachment 6. Yes, there are 88 recommendations for reports, and if you'd like, you can take the entire group up at once.
Yes. So let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
So if we go back to page 1 of Attachment 1, these are the Budget and Finance Committee recommendations. We can go page by page here. Page 1 are recommendations 1 through 4.
Okay, I don't see any. So let's prepare to vote. Mr. Krikorian?
Yeah, I should have said this at the outset, Mr. President, but just as a reminder, what's before you are changes to the mayor's budget. So the mayor's budget is put before you. The Budget and Finance report are the amendments to that mayor's proposal. So that's why it's structured the way it is. I just wanted to remind us that that's how we do this process. This isn't everything that's in there. These are the changes that we recommend to the proposed budget.
Okay, so let's vote on page 1, items 1 through 4. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 2 are recommendations 5 through 9.
Let's vote on those issues. Let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 3, recommendations 10 through 19.
Mr. Weezar.
I'd like to call item page 11. No, I'm fine.
We'll get there. We're on 3 right now. We're on 3. I know you're
I got
excited.
it, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so page 3, items 10 through 19. Let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 4, we have recommendations 20 through 30.
Okay, let's now vote on page 4. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page
Continue.
5, recommendations 31 through 40.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 6, recommendations 41 through 44.
I was waiting on that. Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I'd like to pull item is it R42 on page 6.
Item 42?
Yes.
Okay, so let's vote on all of the items. We're going to hold 42. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Let's move on.
Page 7, recommendations 45 through 50.
Let's vote on that page as well. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 8, recommendations 51 through 60.
Okay, now we'll vote on this page. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 9, recommendations 61 through 66.
Okay, we're voting now on page 9. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 10, recommendations 67 through 71.
Mr. Koretz.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Okay, then let's prepare to vote on this page. Let's open the roll, close it, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 11, recommendations 72 and 73.
Is this you, Mr. Weezar?
Absolutely, sir. I was practicing earlier. So item number 72, special, please.
Well, you did it right. Practice pays off. Okay, let's hold 72, and we'll vote on page 11, item 73. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 12, recommendations 74 through 81.
Okay, we'll vote on page 12 now. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 13, recommendations 82 through 86.
Page 13, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 14, recommendations 87 through 92.
Okay, let's vote on that page as well, 14, right? Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 15, recommendations 93 through 96.
Mr. Krikorian?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask that 93 be held for special discussion.
Let's hold 93 and vote on the remaining. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 16, recommendations 97 through 101.
Let's, Mr. Root?
If we could hold 101, please.
Okay. We're going to hold item 101. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 17, recommendations 102 through 105.
Okay, let's vote on page 17. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue.
Page 18, recommendations 106 through 116.
We're on page 18. No specials, then let's vote. Let's open the roll, Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Continue.
Page 19, recommendations 117 through 125.
We'll vote on that page. Let's open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Continue.
Page 20, recommendations 126 through 132.
Now we're on page 20. Let's open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Continue.
Page 21, recommendations 133 through 142.
Let's prepare. Ms. Martinez.
Yeah, can I call item 137 special?
Which was that?
137.
137. We'll hold that item. Now let's prepare to vote on the remaining items. Let's open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Continue.
Page 22, recommendations 143 through 145.
Okay, let's vote on that page. Page 22, let's open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
All right.
And that's the last page of recommendations.
Mr. President?
Mr. Huizar.
Can we reconsider item 96 on page 15 and call that special, please?
Item what now?
Item 96 on page 15.
Okay, do we have to vote on reconsideration? So let's vote on reconsideration. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
And let's set aside item 96. Let's go to Mr. Koretz. I think you would voice the first concern. Was that item 42?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This should be an easy one. I just wanted to ask that it also be referred to the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee as well.
Could you repeat that?
I'd like to ask that item 42 also be referred to the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee.
All right, without objection. So let's now open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Mr. Huizar, item 72.
Okay. Colleagues, this budget assumes that Measure H is going to pick up a lot of the increases for addressing homelessness that together we had put in our budget over the last couple of years. It is my hope that Measure H actually does provide for the increased services that we envisioned in our comprehensive homeless strategy. That includes support services for the housing that we are going to build thanks to Proposition HHH, sustained engagement by street-level outreach workers and teams that include mental health professionals, in-reach to link to services people who are cycling through city jails, expansion of the coordinated entry system, and more and better integrated shelter beds. These are the kinds of programs that will finally make progress on the crisis of homelessness. However, we don't have this in writing from the county yet. Measure H isn't decided. And for this reason, I want to thank Mr. Bonin and Mr. Marquise Harris-Dawson and the committee for providing a little bridge funding while Measure H gets worked out. And I'm sure that after we get the final Measure H details, we will need to revisit this budget, which I hope we will do in the Homelessness and Poverty Committee. So I'm just pointing out that although this bridge funding is there, we anticipate the final outcome for Measure H, and then we could hopefully, through the FSR or other places, readjust our targets and the bridge funding and the gap funding that we're doing on our end. Thank you.
Okay, so now let's vote on that. That's item 72. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Mr. Krikorian, I think was page 15, item 93.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The recommendation that is before you in the report was kind of an interim recommendation that we've continued to work on, and there will be an amendment circulated with the amendments to reformulate that. And you know, I can tell this is going well because Mr. Bonin put his tie on. That's just fantastic. That is
oh my
fantastic.
God! Can we get a round of applause?
Thank you, Mr. Bonin. Thank you. So
now, if that would just pass up on Mr. Englander and maybe Mr. Buscaino. Oh, no, Mr. Buscaino found
all right.
it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank
all
you
right.
very much. So I wanted to call this one out so that you know what will be before you when we bring the motions up as well, because there's been a fair amount of discussion about this. A lot of it has been incorrect reporting, and I just wanted to address it. So there was about $47 million in the budget that was essentially new revenues that had been derived from Measure M and from the gas tax increase. And the mayor's proposed budget put $20 million of that into a line item that said street reconstruction, Vision Zero, without a lot of allocation of that money. And so that left it to the council to kind of determine how was that going to be appropriated. And there were various permutations of this that went through T committee and otherwise. It became clear through the discussion that a debate was beginning to arise that suggested that street reconstruction and Vision Zero objectives were mutually exclusive. And I think we felt that that was not necessarily the case. And so the idea was that we would allocate some of that funding to street reconstruction. Some of it would be set aside for further policy discussion and consideration as to where the overlap in those things is, because I see it as a Venn diagram. A lot of the street reconstruction work that we're going to do is in fact going to be entirely consistent with Vision Zero goals. We pay out millions of dollars a year. This year, we paid out millions of dollars a year to settle cases involving deaths and serious injuries that occurred because of poor street condition. Bicyclists who, hit breaches in the pavement and were, thrust into traffic and were killed, for example. So there is an overlap in these areas, and I think with further thoughtful discussion, we have achieved the goal, I think, of identifying where that overlap should be and specifying funding that would fund a significant investment in Vision Zero specific goals as well. So the amendment that will be before you provides that delineation and breaks it down. I think Mr. Bonin will want to speak to that a little bit more, but it actually does provide line item appropriations for a variety of Vision Zero goals as well as the street reconstruction. So we won't have to we will be able to address this further. We'll be able to continue to adjust it as the year goes on, as we do with everything. But at least now we know, with a greater degree of certainty, that Vision Zero goals are going to be funded in this budget to a very significant degree. And I offer it to Mr. Bonin if he wants to provide any additional comments now that he put his tie on with regard to the balance that we've tried to strike.
Mr. Bonin?
Are we discussing the motion now? It's circulated. Are we doing the...
We can, but we will bring it back for voting later. I don't want to vote on it now, but we can discuss it now. We can discuss it later.
Well, since I'm standing.
I just wanted to highlight it because the motion is fundamentally different than the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Yes, I am wearing a tie. It was hard to find it this morning. Last time I wore it was Mr. Rosendal's funeral. And every other tie I have was under a box of my kids' clothing. But I wanted to wear one today because this is a very important budget. Mr. Krikorian enumerated a number of things that are very significant about it. The money for homelessness, the commitment to LA Rise, continuing to preserve the integrity of our reserve fund and budget stabilization funds, and also Vision Zero. Every year, I've been around this building for more years than I'd like to remember with Ms. So, and every year there seems to be an issue that sort of dominates the discussion in Budget Committee. Some years it's the pace of hiring, some years it's the size of the police force. Last year it was homelessness, and this year an issue that sort of had outsized attention and discussion was Vision Zero, was the question of what do we do about traffic collisions, our horrendous state of traffic conditions in Los Angeles, one of the worst in the country, leading cause of death of young people under the age of 14 in Los Angeles County. How do we address that? How do we address the fact that we know that there are corridors in the city of Los Angeles where children, grandmothers, people with disabilities are going to get seriously injured or die? We have the data. And this body has approved a Vision Zero plan to address that, do it in a data-based way, do it in an equitable way. And this year we have the benefit of additional resources from SB1 and from Measure M, and gives us an opportunity to address, as Mr. Krikorian said, both reconstruction and safety. And the moment that we got to is because of a lot of different people. I want to just acknowledge first, because sometimes, elbows get jostled in budget deliberations and we disagree in part of the process. The amazing clarion call that the mayor put out. I stood next to Mr. Englander at the press conference issuing the executive directive for Vision Zero. And all the work that Ms. Martinez and Mr. Harris-Dawson and Mr. Weezer have put into this. And all of the groups that are here today, we're not doing public comment today, but ACT LA, LA Walks, AARP, Advancement Project California, Little Tokyo Service Center, Trust South LA, MCM, Scope, LABC, TIE CDC, SAGE, FAST, Investing in Place, and NRDC, groups that have been urging us to do something about this. And we talked about this a lot during budget deliberations, and since Mr. Krikorian and I have been working very hard with the cooperation of the mayor's office and the mayor's personal leadership, trying to figure out a way that we can begin to implement Vision Zero this year. We aren't going to reconstruct every street that we want to do. We're not going to do every safety improvement that we want to do this year. But we'll get more money coming next year and more money after that, and we're beginning to be able to deliver on both of these. There was a fundamental question for me when this came up, because the original proposal had tied Vision Zero very closely to reconstruction. And that is not without merit. As Mr. Krikorian rightly notes, those two things do overlap, and they overlap significantly. But they do not always overlap. And so it was very important for me to push for Vision Zero money, safety money, that was untethered from our failed streets, so that we can, when we fix our failed streets, as we're going to begin to do this year, we can do the Vision Zero improvements that we need, but that we don't hold off on doing the Vision Zero improvements at the most fatal, most dangerous, most necessary spots in the city. So under the proposal that Mr. Krikorian and I have, not only do we put more money into reconstruction, but we allocate we keep the allocations that the mayor's office had made on Vision Zero and put additional resources so that DOT, under the leadership of Salita Reynolds, and BOE and Bureau of Street Services can complete the Phase 1 treatments on the highest priority injury corridors, so that we can do the most we can to save lives this coming year. It's a significant investment. It is significantly more than we have this year. It's more than was originally proposed, and it's a robust way of addressing both the reconstruction and safety. And I want to also acknowledge the CLA's office. We will give them the appropriate shout-outs at the end of this deliberation for everything they've done on everything, but trying to figure out how to thread this needle we couldn't have done without Ms. So and her team. So thanks on that. I look forward to the continued discussion about the specifics, but we worked very hard over the past few days, Mr. Krikorian and I in the mayor's office, to try to figure out a way to address both needs, and I think we do this, the beginning, laying a foundation for how we address both needs in the coming years and with the policy discussions to come. Thanks.
Mr. Buscaina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to rise and recognize Mr. Krikorian and Mr. Bonin for putting together a comprehensive strategy on addressing both the needs of fixing our failed streets and also focusing on and making sure that our streets are safe to advance in a more livable, walkable, bikeable community, city overall. I also want to recognize my colleague Mitch Englander, who Mitch and I, a few years back, we launched a Save Our Streets LA initiative. We clearly identified the fact that the city of LA, a third of our streets are in failed condition, and we also recognize that, smooth streets are safe streets. We held off on moving forward and trying to find revenues to come fix our streets in the city of Los Angeles. But now with the passage of Measure M and SB1, LA is in a unique position to receive tens of millions of dollars of funding to repair our transportation infrastructure over the next few decades. Today's Bike to Work Day. how appropriate that as we celebrate Bike to Work Day, that we have this discussion on finding a way to fix our streets and make them safe so that we create a bikeable community. I rode my bike in with Tamika, with the LA County Bike Coalition, and during our 2-hour ride into work from San Pedro to downtown City Hall, we had an in-depth discussion on and identified clearly a number of potholes and obstructions that we were faced riding our bike into work, and we both agreed that we can do both. We can focus on identifying the high injury network streets, but also doing so by reconstructing and making their streets safer. Basic infrastructure, colleagues, improvements are not sexy, but they are an integral part of the fabric of our daily lives. People don't notice infrastructure until it fails. Replacing a sewer line or a signal box won't get any fanfare, but when either one of those systems fail, we clearly hear about it. Our residents expect their infrastructure to function on a daily basis, and that's what we as a city are charged with delivering. And now with the influx of millions of dollars, we're poised to begin rebuilding an infrastructure into the 21st century. However, LA cannot afford to think about addressing our entire infrastructure on a year-to-year basis. We need a plan, a comprehensive long-term plan from the ground up. And drafting that plan actually starts below our streets at the first layer of our infrastructure problem. Everyone remembers a UCLA water main break. Our sewers and water mains are in desperate need to be upgraded. Without these upgrades, we face a crisis as a city because we will not be able to deliver a basic human right, clean water. Next, we need to focus on our second layer, the paths of travel by which pedestrians, cyclists, buses, cars, and trains get from point A to point B. Paths of travel get you from your house to the grocery store, to work, to school. It's also the basis of our entire emergency response system, whether getting an injured person to the hospital, stopping for a fire, preventing a terrorist attack, or stopping an active shooter. These all rely on paths of travel. But our sidewalks and the roads are clearly crumbling. People can clearly tell when they've crossed into the city line by how bad the streets and sidewalks become. These are roads that are deteriorating under our feet and sidewalks that are impassable. Our roads and streets are unsafe, and when a bus or a pedestrian or a cyclist, in the case of the tragic death of Mr. Gabat, hits a pothole or a road, is when that deadly consequences occur, even when other precaution measures have been taken. Paved streets are safe streets, as I indicated, but once we have reconstructed our failing streets and repaired our broken sidewalks, we have to do more. That brings us to the third layer. How do we keep people who are using this system safe? How do we prevent traffic-related collisions? How do we get to zero traffic-related fatalities? Our roads, signals, crosswalks, curbs, bike lanes, and turn signals need to be redesigned where we know that the status quo is not working. The areas where everyone is suffering because of poor design. We need strong enforcement and redesign to reduce speeding vehicles. We need to make repairs on the high injury network, which makes up 6% of streets, but it's responsible for 2/3 of all deaths and serious injuries. And we need to make all of these improvements quickly in order to meet the mayor's goal of zero traffic deaths by 2025. Which brings me to the fourth and final layer, smart streets. I'll be submitting a motion in a bit, I already did, on addressing how do we prepare for autonomous vehicles. When autonomous vehicles are the majority of cars on the road, when our traffic system will be collecting data from every point along the network, from the street light to the crosswalk, we need to plan for the future. We also need to build a transportation network that can adapt the future while meeting the needs of the present, and that requires foresight and planning, which is why as a city, we need to create a comprehensive plan to address these layers from the ground up over the decades, not just year by year, by ensuring that the departments are working together in a smart way. Otherwise, we'll be wasting millions of taxpayer dollars on projects that end up getting torn out in 5 years or that become obsolete with advances in technology. I'll be submitting a motion as well to address that issue. But ultimately, colleagues, and to our friends, our advocates, and city leaders, we all have the same goals of repairing each layer of our infrastructure, which helps achieve our common goals, saving lives and ensuring that all residents have equitable infrastructure, whether it's a water main or a crosswalk. Addressing each of these layers in this order may mean that our plan will not move as fast as some people would like, but we have to do this right the first time. And if we make Vision Zero improvements, Tamika, but leave a road unreconstructed or a water main or sewer underneath and unprepared, we can have that good work wiped out by a sinkhole or still have deaths because of a pothole in a bike lane. And that's why I'm continue to support advocating for this comprehensive plan, starting along the high injury network from layer 1 to layer 4 and addressing our worst streets first and preventing as many deaths as we can while building the infrastructure system that our residents deserve. So thank you so much. I'm not going to speak anymore. I just laid it all out right now, Mr. President. But
Well,
as you know, I do want to
surely
recognize
did.
the fact that it was
You laid it out.
Amazing work done at the committee level. I know this is important to the mayor as it is important to us and those that were leading this charge. But our work is not complete. Looking forward to moving forward on this.
Thank you. You did lay it out.
And Mr. Engler wants to call for the question.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too want to lay out a little bit here on this issue. And I think it's actually it's an appropriate time for us to do this, we're planting a few flags here. We're going to have this discussion about how our transportation dollars are spent over the course of many years. We're very fortunate to have SB 1, Measure M, new funding coming in for a lot of exciting possibilities. Today's decision is really just about how we spend this year's allocation. But we all know that as we spend this year's allocation, we create a little bit of a precedent and we start creating the footprints for how we're going to move in the future. So it is an important conversation to have even now. And I think my colleagues and I thank you guys for working on this sort of compromise, because I think we're moving in the right direction in that we're able to do multiple goals. But I wanted to put out a few things. And I support, I just want to say, allocating substantial amounts of money for Vision Zero. I'm 100% behind the goals of Vision Zero, and I'm thrilled by it. It's a great way of thinking. I do have some concerns overall of how we're thinking about our transportation dollars being allocated, and I wanted to put that out here. First, dealing with the issue of local return. And I know a lot of you have heard me talk about this before, but Measure M and Measure R, a key part of them, most of Measure M basically goes to large-scale projects that are not in the far-flung areas of this city, that are concentrated downtown and other spots. The one part of Measure M that is basically distributed equally among all of the citizens and voters for it is the local return. That is the sugar that gets people to vote for this Measure M. I had a lot of resistance in my district. I worked with a lot of folks who were skeptical from the last measure that they didn't see that money coming to their district. And we said, no, there is this local return money in here, and we are going to see it. And it was advertised. When you look at the advertisements for Measure M, they talk about how much money each area is going to get, how much money the valley is going to get. And I worry that if we push all of it toward Vision Zero, or certain things that are focused for good reason, but focused in the core of the city, that the further flung areas will lose out substantially. And it's not an idle thought, it's borne out by the numbers, by the facts on the ground. Folks who live in Canoga Park and they see a project happening in downtown South LA, they don't view that as a local project. And there is an inequity here for Angelenos, because if you live in a small city, city of San Fernando, which is less than 10 times smaller than a single district in Los Angeles, you're going to get 100% of your local return dollars to your city and to your community. But if you happen to live in Los Angeles, in Canoga Park or Reseda, you're not going to see that. And in fact, you have an area that's larger than every single city, every other city in the county of Los Angeles that was part of Measure M, save Long Beach. A single district is bigger than that. So that is something we need to keep in mind as we figure out how to distribute these funds moving forward. Second, I have concerns with what appears to be a dichotomy that we only have two goals, maintaining our streets and the Vision Zeros that's mostly focused on arterial streets. In August of 2015, we adopted the Mobility Plan, a plan that establishes a lot of other very important goals. Because today is the Bike to Work Day, I'm going to use some bike-focused examples. For example, we want to increase the number of people who bike and walk in Los Angeles, in part to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and for better health, and all of these good reasons. The Mobility Plan seeks to further that goal by creating a neighborhood network of traffic-calmed and local streets. That network serves a Vision Zero purpose because it provides a safe and effective alternative to cycling on arterial streets or on the sidewalks. It also makes riding a feasible alternative for those who won't bike on high-speed, high-traffic roads. That includes people like me, who like to go biking with my kids, or older people, who I'm becoming one of those, or statistically, women who tend to not want to bike on those high streets as much as men. We can't lose sight of our goal, which is creating transportation system and alternatives for everyone. And that means thinking a little differently. Third, the high-injury networks are extremely important, but I don't want us to be myopic about them, because sometimes the way to save lives is not the high-injury street. For example, let's say you have a fast street that's a high-injury street, and a lot of bikers are getting hit on that street. But right adjacent to it or parallel, you have a bike lane that hasn't been built yet. One way, the high-injury network way, would be fix that street, pay the money, and get that street fixed. But if you take a step back, you realize, well, what if I just built the bike lane out? Then not as many people would go on that street. Or if I created an alternative on one of the non-arterial streets, you would actually create a better alternative with less deaths. But it doesn't quite fit neatly into that formula. And this is not a theoretical example. This is a real example from my district. Portions of 2 north-south streets, DeSoto and Tampa, and 3 east-west streets, Sherman Way, Van Owen, and Victory, are on the high-injury network. But if we extended the bike lanes on another north-south street, Winnetka, so that they connect to the east-west LA River Path and the Orange Line bike path, where pedestrians and bicyclists are entirely separated from cars, we'd actually be creating a safer transportation network, even if the improvement is not on the high-injury network street. In short, we need to make sure we're looking at this holistically, and we need to make sure that we have the flexibility as we assign these dollars to look at it holistically. So I don't want us to get caught up in assigning out every dollar of these measures to one or the other, to maintaining streets or to Vision Zero, because there's a lot of other goals that we've expressed. And fourth and finally is another issue in terms of how these transportation dollars get spent, which we haven't talked about, but I think is very important. We have asked certain communities to accept increased growth and density with the promise of transportation improvements. In a city with severe housing shortages, it's important that we honor those promises. And specifically in my district, we have the Warner Center specific plan that allows significant growth, 19,000 new housing units, one of the few parts of the city where that can happen essentially by right. In exchange for helping to meet the city's housing needs and accepting all of that burden, we promised surrounding neighborhoods there would be transportation improvements to help with the impact of that growth that is being taken on for the entire benefit of the city. And as we decide how to spend our transportation dollars, we need to think about that and provide benefits to places that have accepted the burden of increased growth, especially areas that aren't going to get it on the natural because they don't have the transportation network that part of the other cities have that we need to build out. To wrap it up, I fully support the proposal we're talking about to make more specific allocations of funds to Vision Zero. However, as our discussion about how to spend transportation dollars moves forward, I urge my colleagues to keep in mind all of the goals set forth in the Mobility Plan and the other documents that we as a council have embraced, and to think about this holistically and to not box ourselves in on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Blumenfield, you laid out Mr. Buscaino. So let's have a short layout from Mr. Rue, or will it be a filibuster?
Wait, Mr. President, is that a challenge? You want me to out? No. I just wanted to quickly and succinctly rise to really thank the leadership of our budget chair, Councilmember Paul Buscaino. Let me go to Plan B with my thesis here. No. Councilmember Paul Krikorian, our Transportation Chair, Mike Bonin, our Public Works Chair, Joe Buscaino. So, and that's twice, right, Paul, that I did that. No, to thank
you may want to go back to just laying out.
Right.
Just lay out it.
I just want to thank all the chairs for their leadership on coming up with this great compromise. This delivers on the promises that we promised for Measure M, where we fulfill the promises of doing our streets while prioritizing Vision Zero efforts. So I really want to thank all the chairs. Thank you very much.
Ms. Martinez?
I'll be even shorter than that. So since I've gotten here 4 years ago, we've been talking about this real discussion in terms of the problem we're having with this alarming increase in traffic accidents. And so last Friday, when we had the budget represented to us, I saw zero investment in ensuring that people who are simply trying to get to work or are trying to get their kids to school don't die in the process. That we're actually putting money into a plan that we and our mayor had made a priority back in 2015 when we said we wanted to put real resources into ensuring that people did not die on their way to school. And so this budget as presented to us on Friday didn't have that commitment. And I was very alarmed by it, Mr. Bonin, as you were, and in talking to our other colleague, Marquise Harris-Dawson, we were quite frankly disappointed. And working through this process, I do not know how I go back to my district and tell my constituents that what good does it do to repave a street when I had 9 deaths in 2017, 9 deaths so far due to traffic-related accidents. So I grapple with the fact that we made a real commitment to try to resurface our streets, repave our streets, build that infrastructure that is in some of our communities non-existent or just simply need improvement because nothing's been done in over 70 years. And how do we ensure that our families can get to school and get to work safely because people are simply not paying attention or our roads are way too dangerous for them to do so? So I think, colleagues, it's time for us to stop the talking, end the debate about what's more important than the other. Let's get to work, find the resources that we said we were going to commit to ensure that we reduce accidents by 2025, put our money where our mouth is, and ensure that we bring these resources back to our districts, because the accidents and the fatalities that impact the city impact low-income communities, communities of color, who are dealing with pollution crisis in our districts. You know, I would love to create more bike lanes in my district, parts of Sun Valley, but what good does that do when people live across the street from landfills? And what good does it do if I now have 9 people who are dead as a result of us not creating corridors for where people can travel safely to work and to school? So, colleagues, to me this is very simple. It's not one over the other. It's about saving lives and making sure that we stop the talk and actually get to work and allocate real money to ensure that people simply live safely in our city. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Koretz. I got you, Harris Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. President. As accustomed as I am to being long-winded, I will just say this time congratulations to the chair of the Budget Committee and the committee that I have previously served on for their good work, and I want to attach myself to Mr. Blumenfield's comments, which articulated my position perfectly as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harris Dawson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to add a little bit to the discussion that we've had today. I think the compromise that we have is a good one. It's the result of a lot of work and a lot of understanding and a lot of time on task, and so we're very appreciative of that. I just wanted to raise the discussion because I know it's one we'll come back to over and over again. For me, this so much isn't about Vision Zero, which kind of looks back at what's happened and tries to correct that. It really is about looking at the vision for Los Angeles going forward. This city has been known around the world as the car capital of the world. As history moves forward, less and less people will build used cars, we think, and so pedestrian safety will become more of an issue. And so we have this situation where we need to preserve what we've built on the one hand, and on the other hand, prepare for the future that we know is coming. Except we've got a couple problems. In a lot of parts of the city, the old thing hasn't ever been built yet. So I was out walking precincts in the 7th District earlier this week, and I was literally scared for my life just walking up and down the streets because you have streets without striping. People are going 70, 80 miles an hour on residential streets. And so just the simple act of walking up and down the street presents a challenge. And so in some situations, we need much more spending and much more investments in the basic infrastructure and repairing our streets and actually building streets in places that don't have them. And on the other hand, we need to prepare for the future that will come irrespective of what we do. And so I just want to put this marker down because this will come up over and over and over again. And I think we should think about it in terms of preserving our heritage and building for the future.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Krikorian, I'm assuming, or in fact I won't, do you want to hold this item until we get to the motion that addresses it?
Yeah,
and we've already had our conversation on it. Does that work?
I think so, Mr. President. So I would just suggest that we go ahead and, we'll come back to this when we address all the motions. We'll just keep it in order. I think this is number one in your
Yes,
packet.
it is. It's what I have says it's motion number one. Okay, well, let's take care of a slight error. So, Mr. Koretz, if I misspeak, let me know. We need to vote on reconsideration for item 42 and also R42. So the first vote would be on reconsideration. So let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, so now we're going to vote on 42. Let's open the roll. Because we vote on 42, and then what I want to do is with 142, I want to make sure that we refer Koretz's item to the Personnel Committee. So the mistake was, instead of 42, it should have been R42. So do we vote on 42 now, or so the clerk is saying 42 now. So so now we're voting on, don't confuse me guys, I got it. We're voting on 42. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, now we vote on R42 as amended, right? Yes. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, now the next item. So is Mr. Weezer, I lost. Item 96, Mr. Weezer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, I just wanted to call attention to this item because of my ongoing concern about the lack of our city's ability to clean up some of our streets when they are overflowing with trash. And we've all felt the impact of that throughout the city in the last 4 or 5 years, more so than we ever have. And there are certain parts of the city that get impacted the most. For example, in downtown Los Angeles, we started Operation Healthy Streets, where in Skid Row now we have dedicated crews that go out there often and with social workers to ask people if they need services. We also have our business improvement districts that help clean up some of these areas. But there are many parts in downtown Los Angeles that add a lot of economic activity to the city that don't have these types of services. Areas in the fashion district where we have industry, where there's really very little dedicated crews that go out there. Now, if we call the crews to go out there, it may take weeks, if not months, to pick this up. Many of these businesses already feel the pressure about moving out of the city of Los Angeles. And if the city cannot do its basic responsibility and go out there and clean these trash-filled streets in a timely manner, it gives them even more reason to move out. I'm concerned about this item because it trims certain new programs from a full year to 6 months in terms of the services of going out there to clean up. Now, let me put this in context. The budget is good in that it adds 2 new HOPE teams and 1 more Clean Streets crew. But that new team, that 5th crew, let me tell you what that means. We currently have 3,600 open requests for cleanups across the city. That is 3,600 cleanups that our current crews have not been able to get to. Not what they have done, they have not been able to get to. If we add 1 more cleanup crew, and this crew gets to, if the crew were able to get to 3 sites a day, Monday through Friday, with no time off, it will take 4.5 years to get our existing request out of the queue. That's not acceptable. And when I feel the pressure in downtown LA with businesses wanting to leave because we cannot provide the basic services, when we all feel the pressures throughout our districts that our cleanup crews don't go out there often enough, I just want to bring this to our attention because it's something that I think we should continue to strive to get quicker responses, and not only for the aesthetics, but it's public safety, it's economic development if we continue to lose businesses, and it cuts across many of the issues we care about. I put in a motion to see how we could examine this and to focus on highest need areas and those chronic need areas like downtown and other areas of the city that really don't get any service for months. I've also asked to see how we could examine reduced false starts and aborted schedules, which oftentimes we get something scheduled and it doesn't follow through as we promised our constituents. And we want to fix that so that even with the resources we do have, that is fixed as well. So I've introduced that motion, and hopefully we could get a better handle on this as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Weezar. Now let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Mr. Rue, item 101.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just called this item a special because I wanted to make sure that the language change is changed to motion number 7 that I introduced. That will be voted on later today. And the intent here is to give the department and the city attorney the flexibility to explore a variety of cost-saving options as we continue to consider how to fund the city's HPOZ program. And I also want to get clarification from the CLA that the revised language introduced today, that will be introduced today, would in fact be replaced language in item 101B in the committee report.
There is a motion in your packet, which we have not gotten to yet, but if this item is approved and that motion is approved, we see them as complementary, and so additional options would be explored if that motion is also approved.
Okay.
That satisfies you, Mr. Rue?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Okay, let's vote on that item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, yeah, Mr. Rue?
Actually, can we replace the language completely? That's the intent of my motion on item number 7. Motion number 7. And this was already worked out with the council president's office and the budget chairs.
So why don't we hold this for right now and make sure. We'll move on as we're going over this. We'll move on to Ms. Martinez and item 137. And then if you guys could quickly huddle to make sure that everybody's on the same page on this issue. Ms. Martinez, we're on 137.
I think Sharon had it.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. On item 137, I'd like to delete recommendation 137 and instead move $30,000 of SOAR and salary savings to the expense account for the purchase of undercover vehicles for the OVB Human Trafficking Task Force.
Okay, on that item, let's open the roll. Yes.
Yes, Mr. President. I believe Ms. Martinez is also requesting that that item in the committee report be deleted and substitute with her new language.
Right.
Okay, so let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Now, Ms. So, let's go back to Mr. Rue's item, which was 101, I believe.
Yes, so on number 101, the Budget and Finance Committee report was looking for full cost recovery. Mr. Rue's motion, motion number 7, would explore additional cost recovery options that could include cost recovery as well as not full cost recovery. So that's the difference.
Okay, so then let's vote on that. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay, at this point in time, why don't we begin processing or going through the motions? So, Mr. Krikorian, if we're going to go through the motions, the first one is the motion that we had our conversation about. So.
Yes, so members, you should have before you now motions 1 through 16. I assume there are still some in the works in the back, but right now we can do the first 2 packets. The first motion is the one that we've discussed. This is the appropriation of various portions of the previously unallocated transportation funds. And I think it's been debated sufficiently, Mr. President, and I would request your aye vote on motion number 1.
Councilmember?
Go ahead, Mr.
Yes, sir. If we
Llewellyn.
can make one request that it's the CLA and the CAO work on this program.
Bye. Let's
okay.
Go ahead, Ms. So.
And just one additional clarification. So it is our understanding that from this motion that funds are indeed appropriated and that they are not contingent on a report coming back, but rather they are appropriated in the budget, and DOT and various departments are allowed to move forward with the expectation that we will be reporting, but it's not contingent.
That's the intention of the motion.
Thank you.
And so the amendment is to add the CAO's office where we instruct the CLA to coordinate with the other departments, correct? That's acceptable to me, Mr. Bonin? Yeah.
Okay,
so
then
we would recommend your aye vote.
Let's vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay.
Motion number 2, Mr. President,
Yeah.
I would request that we refer to the Budget and Finance Committee.
So without objection, we'll do that. Continue.
Motion number 3 relates to the city's hiring of a biologist, and that's a report back. I would recommend that be approved.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
And members, if you have motions, let's get them in. Mr. Krikorian, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion number 4 by Mr. Kretz is a report back regarding various hiring practices. It's a report back. I'd recommend an aye vote.
Let's prepare to vote on that item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Continue.
Motion number 5 is by Mr. Weezar, a request for a report back regarding roof repairs at the Los Angeles Theater Center. That is a report back. I'd recommend an aye vote.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Motion number 6 by Mr. Kretz relates to a report back to the Budget and Finance Committee and the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee regarding the Targeted Local Hire Working Group and the Strategic Workforce Development Task Force. That is a report back. I'd recommend an aye vote.
Okay, on that, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Motion number 7 was mentioned by Mr. Rue earlier. This relates to Historic Preservation and Mills Act fees. Mr. Rue, did you want to make an amendment to the motion as it's written?
Yes.
So it's contained in the written motion that we have. That
Yes.
Okay, very good. Then with that, I would recommend an aye vote. That is a report back.
Okay, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Motion number 8 by Mr. Weezar relates to the potential purchase of a property in his district, and I would ask that that be referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Okay, without objection.
Okay, we can move into the second packet now, beginning with motion number 9 by Mr. Kretz, which relates to adding a regular authority and providing grant funding for a senior personnel analyst. I'd ask that that be referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
So ordered. Continue.
Motion number 10 by Mr. Weezar relates to, as he had discussed earlier, improving the efficiency of deployed crews with the Bureau of Sanitation and LASA and the Los Angeles Police Department for encampment cleanup. That is a report back, an important report back indeed, and I'd ask that we approve that. I recommend an aye vote.
So on this item, please, Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Motion number 11 by Mr. Weezar is a report back on the Lifeline reimbursement program, and that is a report back. I'd recommend an aye vote.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate.
Motion
14
number,
ayes.
Sorry. Motion number 12 by Mr. Rue is a report back regarding the purposeful aging program within the aging department. It's a report back. I recommend an aye vote.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Motion number 13 by Mr. Buscaino is a report back regarding smart road technology and related recommendations. That is a report back. I'd ask for an aye vote.
Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Item 14 is an amendment, a motion by me asking for a report back from the Comptroller's Office regarding special fund balances that can be remitted to the general fund to offset general fund costs. I would recommend an aye vote on my motion.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
You may want to repeat that vote again. Let's make sure we heard. No, anyway, go ahead, Mr. Gregorian.
Motion number 5 by Mr. Weezar relates to. Sorry?
15.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Number 15, sorry. By Mr. Weezar relates to a report back on potential sources of funding for the Los Angeles Police Museum repairs, and that is a report back, so I'd recommend an aye vote.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
And motion number 16 by Mr. Kretz asks for a report back from the Bureau of Contract Administration with regard to its work on wage theft. That is a report back, and I'd recommend an aye vote.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
And as of this moment, Mr. President, that's all the motions that we have distributed.
Okay, you want to take a recess for a few minutes?
Yeah, we can.
And if you have motions, members, please get them in. There's some refreshments in the back, but we'll be in recess for hopefully 43 seconds. But no, we'll be in recess until the other motions are ready. Members, let's return to our desks. In the next minute, we're going to get started. Our last batch of motions are being circulated. Okay, so now we are distributing our last packet of motions. It's my understanding, members, that today is Luigi's birthday. Luigi, stand up. I want to put you on the television. Let's get Luigi. He's 18. In fact, I'll do that. And Ms. So, why don't you clarify item 93? It's my understanding we're going to need to vote on that in a few minutes. Maybe you could explain that. Then we'll vote on it, and then we'll get into the remaining motions.
Correct. Yes. Item 93 in the Budget and Finance Committee report was the initial recommendations as it related to the transit dollars for Reconstruction Vision Zero. Motion B actually amends that item to actually allocate the $23 million. So both recommendation number 93 and motion number 1 need to be adopted. So I believe that the council has not yet taken action on item number 93.
So on item 93, unless Mr. Krikorian says hold the bus on that issue, why don't we vote on item 93? Let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, members, we'll be starting in a minute.
I know.
Mr. Krikorian, are we ready to begin?
Take it up. Oh, you know what?
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members, you should have before you now motion packet number 3 with motions 17 through 26. Motion number 17 by Mr. Buscaino relates to reimbursement by the port for haul-out repair and maintenance costs for the city's fireboats and a new fast response vehicle. I would recommend this a report back on that agreement. So this, I would recommend approval.
Okay, so let's open the roll on this issue. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Continue, Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you. Motion number 18 by Mr. Buscaino calls for a report to ensure that transportation-related construction costs be designed and executed in the most cost-effective manner. That is a report back. I recommend an aye vote.
Okay, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Motion number 19 by President Wesson has to do with identifying funding for contractual audit services in the Controller's Office. I would ask that that be referred to Budget and Finance.
Okay, so without objection.
Motion number 20 by Mr. Cedillo asks for identification of $750,000 for a pilot ADA compliant program in that it calls for identification of funding. I'd ask that that be referred to Budget and Finance.
Okay, without objection.
Motion number 21 by the Council President calls for 6 months funding for a senior management analyst and a fiscal systems specialist in the Controller's Office. That does require funding. I would ask that it be referred to Budget and Finance.
Okay, we will refer that.
Motion number 22 by Mr. Cedillo has to do with identifying funding for the Northeast Los Angeles Homeless Shelter and a related report back in that it does require identification of funding. I'd ask that that be referred to Budget and Finance.
So ordered.
Motion number 23 by Mr. Cedillo has to do with a report on expanding the Park Ranger program in District 1. That is a report back. I'd recommend an aye vote.
Let's, on this item, open the roll, Madam Clerk. Close the roll. Now tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Thank you. Continue.
Motion number 24 by Mr. Cedillo has to do with using MICLA funding for a planning and study on a building in Highland Park, and that involves MICLA expenditure. I would ask that it be referred to Budget and Finance.
Okay, so ordered.
Motion number 25 by Mr. O'Farrell has to do with the homeless partnership endeavor or HOPE teams in our council districts and asks for a report on various recommendations. It is a report back, so I'd ask for an aye vote on that matter.
Okay, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
And finally, Mr. President, motion number 26 by Mr. O'Farrell calls for a report on the needs and funds necessary to expand the Clean Streets program. That is a report back, so I would ask for an aye vote on that matter as well.
Okay, let's, on this item, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Yes, and I just was handed a couple of additional motion A and B.
Yeah, so Mr. President, motion A and B are the actual implementing motions that allow us to go ahead and approve the budget. And Ms. Tso, did you want to speak to those?
Yes, Mr. President. A and B are your closing recommendations. These are the recommendations which instruct the city attorney along with CAO and CLA to actually prepare the budget resolution and to make any adjustments as necessary to reflect the actions of the council today. So as adopted today, we will be bringing back a budget resolution which will be the formal approval. It is a document that will be coming back to you next week, but this is the action today that instructs us to take all of those actions to bring that back to you.
Okay, so do we vote for them combined or separately, or what's your fancy?
Unless there's a reason that we need to take them up separately, I think we can vote on them together.
Okay.
But before we do that, Mr. President, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that all of the recommendations in the report that we've needed to deal with have been dealt with. All of the motions that have been submitted have been dealt with. So the last remaining thing to do on this would be approval of motions A and B, which I'd ask for your aye vote.
Okay, so now, members, we're going to vote on motions A and B combined. Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, so before we go on, or before I recognize Mr. Krikorian to close, I want to thank all of the staff that really, you guys are the glue that keeps this together, that keeps us together. Thank you for all of your hard work. The CLA's office, the CAO's office. We want to say that it was a pleasure working with the mayor's office and the city attorney, all involved. This budget was challenging, and I think that Mr. Krikorian has showed, as he historically has done, phenomenal leadership. So I'd ask that the members give Mr. Krikorian a round of applause, because he does deserve it. Plus, I like doing it because it makes Paul go crazy.
It really does. Yeah, it really does.
I can't help myself. But to you, Mr. Krikorian, and to every member of the Budget Committee, to all of the members on the council, because even though it's just the Budget Committee, every member contributes. So I want to thank you for your contributions. But for the Budget Committee, for all of the long hours, all of the work that you put in, I think you're a perfect example of teamwork and what can happen when people do come together. Ms. Martinez, I can't say enough about you stepping in, throwing you, from the frying pan into the fire, and you did one hell of a job. Let's give Ms. Martinez a round of applause for all of the good work that she did on the Budget Committee. So with that said, Mr. Krikorian, do you want to, let's wrap this thing up?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for that, your kind words, and also that transition to the end credits portion of our hearing. I do want to join you in recognizing my colleagues on the Budget and Finance Committee, first of all. This has been just an extraordinary team, and the work is hard, but it's made much easier by having such talented people on our committee to work with, and both the members and their staffs. And so I want to thank our Vice Chair, Mitch Englander, and Nicole Bernson in his office. I want to thank Councilmember Bonin and Lori McLennan in his office. Of course, Ms. Martinez, as you mentioned, and Arcelia Arce in her office, and Councilmember Blumenfield and Jeff Jacoberger in his office. This has really been it's been one of our more difficult years, but as I say, it's really made so much better by the hard work and diligence of these members who do so much work for the entire council and the staff that supports them. So thank you to all of you. I want to thank the mayor, first of all, for giving us a budget to work with that really was a forthright budget, and I think in some ways as visionary a budget as we can do in constrained economic times. And it was a pleasure to be able to work with the mayor and his budget team, Matt Szabo, John Chavez, and the rest of the budget team. It's been a real pleasure to get through this with you. Of course, the CAO's office, Rich Llewellyn and his staff, particularly Ben Ceja, Jacob Wexler, and the Budget Memo Squad, who worked efficiently both in our hearings and today to get all of this done. And the CLA's office, Sharon So, Karen Calfian, Andrea Galvin, Roy Morales, and the entire CLA team. It's just, they do amazing work every year. Even when they reduce our expectations and say, this is the year when we're not going to be able to fund very much, which they say every year, and they're right, but somehow they manage to focus on the priorities that we present and give us a package to work with that allows us to meet some of those priorities, and it never ceases to amaze me, and I am immensely appreciative. And Richard Williams and Erica Pulst, who are clerks on the Budget and Finance Committee, who somehow managed to keep us working efficiently. I want to thank them as well. And Mr. President, you for having given us such support and confidence to the members, and to your staff, Andrew Westall, Ed Johnson, and Justin Wesson. This couldn't be possible without the continuing support that you provide to this committee, and so I appreciate it very much. All of the general managers and departmental staff who put so much time into the budget product that we produce every year, and have to operate, frankly, in constrained circumstances without resources. And we think that's true of all of our departments. We know that still, even 10 years after the worst part of the Great Depression, Great Recession, they still are struggling with inadequate resources in every single department. And our employees and their managers somehow manage to keep it together and come to us with modest requests, because they know that we're not yet at a time that we can start spending to restore services the way that we would all like. I really do appreciate that very much. I want to give one special point of privilege, if I can, to recognize the work of the hub of the wheel, the inimitable Matt Hale of my office, who does all of the hard work that I inappropriately get the credit for. I want to thank Matt Hale for being the brains that makes this all happen. And there's so many others in all of our individual staffs, the departmental staffs, the offices staffs that I mentioned, people who do this work. This takes hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people, to get us this budget. And most of them will never, be adequately recognized for the work they do. And you told me the other day, Mr. President, how hard some of this work that in passing a budget is that no one ever sees. It's the part of this that's invisible, that gets done quietly and behind the scenes, that people don't get recognized for. And that's due to the diligence and the commitment of public servants who are doing the right thing for the city of Los Angeles, who don't get the recognition that we do, but they should. And so to everyone who participated in this budget, I want to thank them and thank all of you members. And I think with that, we have a budget, Mr. President.
Okay. Ms. Martinez.
President, I just want to rise and thank my colleagues on the Budget Committee for welcoming me. I know that I stepped in towards the middle of this year, and I want to give also thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity to serve on this committee. I know I'm a lot. Sometimes I'm more than frank, but I really appreciated the fact that I got to not only represent my neck of the woods, but also advocate for cleaner and safer streets and parks, and also speaking up and ensuring that we have the tools necessary to continue diversifying our fire department. And I can't thank Mr. Krikorian enough. From the very moment I stepped onto the committee, you welcomed me, you supported me, you and your staff. I'm eternally grateful to your leadership and to the fact that he runs a tight ship, and I cannot appreciate that even more. He got us out of here on time, committed to making sure that we got the job done. And I also want to thank Mr. Rich Llewellyn and Matt Zabel. Thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you and coming into my office and expressing the needs of the mayor's office as well as meeting our needs as a council. And to this woman-led budget team of the CLA's office. Can we say that again? This woman-led budget team. I could not have been more proud. On Friday, you saw me taking a picture of you three because you made me so proud that the brains of how this city runs is led by these amazing women. Sharon, Andrea, and Karen, thank you so much. And it just goes to show that when women are at the table, you'd be surprised how much we get done. I also yes, thank you, yes. And I also want to thank my staff, Arcelia and Alexis. Please come forward. These women, come on. Where is Arcelia?
Give them a round of applause.
They have been amazing. If you saw my Instagram, we were here past midnight. I felt compelled to bring them dinner because they were intent on making sure that we got through all of our budget memos on time and that I understood what we were voting on. And these women in my office are amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And again, thank you, Mr. Krikorian, for your leadership. And let's do the right thing and get this budget passed. Thank you.
Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, too, just want to rise and thank my colleagues for an extraordinary job, certainly led by the committee, but also work from the CLA's office, staff, and all the council officers that have chipped in and given their 2 cents worth to really make this a much better deal. I'm pleased to vote on a budget that intentionally allocates resources, much needed resources in parts of town frequently where those needs aren't met. And so we've allocated money, we've allocated other resources to provide a number of services and programs that are going to positively impact citizens, certainly in the areas that I represent. And so I just want to say thank you. You know, as we ride this economic wave throughout the city, I think it's important that we leverage public and private sector resources in a way that helps all the boats rise in our community. And so I'm pleased that passing this budget is a step in that direction, and I just want to say thank you. Thanks for the efforts.
Okay, with that said, everybody, one more round of applause. This meeting is adjourned.